Right, so first of all, apologies. I didn't get the memo, so I'm here dressed in anonymous businessman sync. So I apologize for that. Tomorrow I'll come with my sandals and shorts. So it is a great honor and a pleasure to be having and hosting a panel of industry experts and heavyweights to discuss a matter that is very close to my heart, and I believe very close to a lot of people in this room, because it facilitates what you do and the future for you, right? So, kick off. We'll start with one Mr. Basha Pile, who I believe is online. Somebody keep me honest. So, yes. Kick off. There you go. Start with one Mr. Basha Pile, who I believe is online. Somebody keep me honest. All right. He's online, so apologies for that. I'm sure the tech people at the back will sort us out. He's an expert in the industry. He's been doing this for more than 20 years. He moved from, incidentally, we were colleagues a couple of years ago, but he's now doing purely cloud consulting at Poprush Cloud and Consulting. He's the managing director. A round of applause for Pasha. I'd also like to introduce Beck Njagi. I got that right? All right, small bet going there, don't worry. See me sideways for details. She's the Senior Manager Strategic Initiatives at Diamond Trust Bank. We've talked about women in tech. She's one of the very fearless leaders in that space. She says she's not going to serve as NET, so good luck with that. Come to the board, please. Lots of experience in the industry, has been working at DTB, worked previously at Equity, long history. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
I would also like to introduce our cybersec specialist. I know we've just had a whole section on security, but we're going to be looking at it specifically from a cloud perspective. One, Mr. Shalom Oyibe, to come on board. Thank you very much, Shalom. Round of applause for him as well.
Thank you.
All right, so let's kick off. As I want to believe, everybody in the room has had some impression of cloud. It's a word that is bandied around. It's a very sexy word right now. But I'd just like to take a moment to baseline, as it were, to get everybody on the same page. What do we talk about when we talk about cloud? What does it mean to you as a user, somebody who's leveraging the technology, as a fintech or as a bank, right? So for that one, let me start once again with Basha. You can tell us what it is, from your point of view, what is the cloud, and what does it mean to a lot of the people here?
Well, on that side, maybe just a thumbs up to give me an indication that you guys can hear me here. Yeah, great. So thanks, Andrew. Yeah, look, I think cloud has become the new word, you know. A few years ago, it was IT, and, you know, it was a broad aspect of what that comprised of, and we're seeing the same thing now from a cloud perspective. You know, as Poprush, what we do is we focus on enabling cloud strategies and cloud solutions for our customers, and that encompasses private cloud, public cloud, multi-cloud, and essentially what we call as hybrid cloud. And you know, that in essence, in terms of from an infrastructure to leveraging the services that sits on all of these cloud providers, is what I would tag as what cloud is today.
Fantastic. So you're talking about not just the hyperscalers, you're not just talking about the private cloud or hosted cloud, you're talking about that and everything in between when you talk about cloud. I think very important for that context, because sometimes it is misunderstood, right? We sit here and we think cloud is maybe the hyperscalers, your GCP, AWS, and those kind of guys. So right, so I'll jump right from there into our main topic, right? So cloud, is it an opportunity or is it too much of a risk, right? So the audit people, at this point in time, you're allowed to put your pens away and just listen. I know a lot of ears perk up when you hear the word risk, but for our purposes, I'll start with Becky, right? As a resident banker on the panel, right? So what do you see as some of the opportunities and some of the use cases for cloud in your business and specifically in the financial services industry?
Right. For me, I think in the banking space, we are looking at availing the banking services to our customers anywhere, anytime, on any channel. And the cloud is really going a long way to enable that, especially at a much faster speed than we did on-prem. Just thinking about the procurement process and all the setups that need to go into a new implementation on-prem compared to cloud, it's much faster, more efficient, and easier on the cloud. Over and above the customer experience being improved and our time to market, there's also the technical side of it, where the developers have a much easier time with the development activities on the cloud compared to on-prem. And obviously, we can't forget the part that the pandemic and working remotely played, because it definitely speeded up the need for us to implement and do things remotely, and the cloud goes a long way to facilitate that.
Fantastic. I'd like to pick up on something you just said there about the pandemic, right? So the pandemic really has changed a lot about the way we think about the world, right? Mm-hmm. And provision of services and what can be done and where it can be done, right? So in terms of your own cloud journey, mm-hmm. Has there been anything definite, or has there been any kind of major change in the organization in terms of how you see service delivery, leveraging the cloud technology? Or what are you seeing in terms of your industry, maybe in terms of the people who are here seated in fintech, and the difference between how, as an organization, you have evolved and how that the pandemic has affected you?
Yeah. Just speaking generally fast, I would say the industry has been forced to change because, as you mentioned, COVID caused us to have to think of other channels other than the traditional branch-enabled process. So automatically, we had to start digitizing a lot more of our processes and availing them through digital channels. Over and above that, there was the need for more efficient and quicker turnaround time in the service completion. So, for example, previously you'd go in and apply for a loan, and you have to fill forms and do so much of a manual process, and it moves from one office to another. So the digitization of processes has made banks and financial service providers think very differently in terms of how they can achieve that faster and give a much better customer experience.
Fantastic. I know you're looking at me looking at all the loopholes that you can close. So maybe you can give us your thoughts on that in terms of what you see. You are in the industry, you are advising clients in terms of how they can move to the cloud. What do you see there are some of the drivers as well?
Some of the drivers are efficiency, mm-hmm. And competitive edge. Mm-hmm. When you're moving to the cloud, it's important to know that you have a team of researchers sitting behind, trying to ensure that they beat their delivery time in the previous week. So those are the things you're looking at in terms of from a technical driver point of view. Now, if I also talk about security, you definitely need to worry about your data. You definitely need to worry about who has access to your cloud. And it's so interesting when you read a lot of cybersecurity reports, it's as though Africa does not exist, you know. But we have providers here who can actually give you African statistics on the cloud security landscape. And I believe we'll get more into that during the conversation.
Fantastic. Basha, I think it will be also interesting to hear a bit of your point of view here, specifically around use cases. They have talked about some of the technical things, the efficiency, the agility, those kinds of stuff. Have you seen any kind of unique use cases that, especially for the FSI, for fintech and those kinds of guys, that you'd want to point out in terms of movement to the cloud?
Yeah, great question, Andrew. I mean, maybe just to step back on some of the comments from the other two panelists. I think and I often speak to this when I speak to customers, I think what we see now, and excuse the pun, but is a perfect storm that's essentially emanating around cloud and cloud solutions, between, as mentioned by Becky, between the impact of COVID and organizations needing to essentially reassess and pivot their business models. We also seen the huge investment from the building of new data centers and hyperscalers on our shores. And all of these is culminating in that perfect storm. The drivers, as mentioned, are still the same. The difference is, I think, the lens in which they've been enabled is very much driven through digital and cloud-based technologies. If we come back to your question around some of the use cases, specifically in the financial services and fintech space, the big opportunity is still around the shift of infrastructure into more of a hybrid or hybrid multi-cloud environment. Not everything will move into the hyperscalers, due to regulatory and policies as well. But I think the big change there is it's not just a shift in lift like we used to see before. It's really how organizations are looking at the opportunity to migrate to also modernize a lot of their applications on the back of that. The biggest, I would say, from an applications perspective, is still sitting within the customer experience and customer onboarding side of things. So everything from KYC to hyper-personalization of offerings back to customers or end customers. And these are very much driven through the services that you can leverage on top of cloud, like AI and machine learning, or the ability to use data in far more intelligent ways to personalize offerings to end customers. The other area where I think there's a massive play at the moment is this cross collaboration we've seen across industries. So telcos are now calling themselves techcos. Retail is now saying they're doing into financial services. I'm currently working with a sport and entertainment entity that's actually derived new revenue channels through selling insurance products to an end customer. I think the exciting thing for fintech and FSI is that across all of these industries, at the core of it is still a financial service or financial offering of sort. So you take the massive growth that we've seen just in mobile wallets like Apple Pay and Samsung Pay and some of the local providers. I think every other industry is looking to see how they can leverage that use case in their own business models as well.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
So to hear you speak, to hear our people speak, you'd imagine we should all be on the cloud, right? But that's not how the real world works. So I'll take a step back, right? So what is stopping us from moving all our stuff to Alibaba or Azure or AWS or any of these guys? So what are the barriers? What are some of the challenges that you've seen in terms of cloud adoption, whether private, public, hybrid? I'll start with you, Becky.
All right. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the technical expertise. So what's happening is we may not be having as up to scale the technical expertise that is needed to drive the conversation and actually implement the cloud adoption. And in most cases, you'd find perhaps even the teams that were working on-prem would be the ones expected to deliver on the cloud. So they will introduce the same approach that they had on-prem on the cloud. And obviously there's disconnect there. So either it doesn't work or it starts off but doesn't deliver the value that is expected. So I feel that's one of the barriers. Another thing is obviously the bank services can be quite complex. So it's not just a matter of picking it up and replicating it on the cloud. So there should be some level of strategy or vision that goes into your cloud strategy. such that whatever you're building on the cloud, there's actually a purpose or objective that you're having. So what happens is, obviously, because cloud is a buzzword, everyone is just looking to do it, but you don't know why you're doing it, and then obviously the teams that are on the end of implementing are just going in all different kinds of direction. So just having a proper strategy and knowing where you're going, what your organization is trying to achieve with the cloud adoption is really critical. So when it's lacking, either it doesn't see through, or whatever is done on the cloud is not delivering value. So at the end of the day, you find guys saying cloud is too expensive, cloud is not working for us, it's complicated, and all these other presumptions and perceptions that are there. But in actual sense, you're not incorporating the right teams, you're not having the right purpose or goals for your cloud adoption. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting point of view. And you've mentioned a couple of very interesting things. You've talked about skills, and I think the discussion around skills, and especially in tech, is an ongoing discussion, right? We know about this brain drain, we talk about the operational complexity, some of those hidden costs that some people may not be aware of until you move to the cloud, right? But I'd like to just take one of those and pick on you right now, Shell, right? Security. Every time we talk about cloud, or we talk about moving to the cloud, and especially when people think about the hyperscalers, people think about the security concerns, right? My question to you is these security concerns, and I'm going to separate regulation here because we've talked about regulation here, and we all know that FSI is highly regulated, correct? Right? And that's a conversation we could spend a lot of time on. But from your point of view, the security questions, the security concerns, what do you see out there? Are these security concerns real? Are they applicable in this market? What do you see in terms of what people are doing in terms of the cloud adoption journeys? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges with security? How can we overcome those?
Thank you very much. So I'll take an excerpt from what Becky said. In a lot of fintechs and in a lot of companies who want to move to the cloud, they want to use the same mentality for on-premise for cloud. But the difference with that is cloud is agile, and sometimes security is not necessarily agile. And what we are seeing a lot is, because DevOps is agile, there might be security budget, let's say $500,000 for security, and because the security team is not agile to consume that budget, the security budget is taken away and being used for expansion. Now, expansion is good, but why would you want to expand your cloud estate without securing it? Now, if I give African statistics on cloud, and I'll do this in a journey to save on time, the first thing you need to do when you're moving to cloud is visibility. And I'll give an example. Right? We did an assessment for someone in South Africa at FinTech, and we asked them, how many web services do you think you have? And they told us 43. And after the assessment, we found out they had over 800 plus. So that meant over 800 plus attack vectors. So we have the team who knows one thing, and we have security team who's saying another. The second step, or in terms of your cloud security journey you need to do, is threat detection, right? If you were in the Cloud Security Summit 3 months ago, I had put up a statistic where over 353 routers in Kenya were infected with Mirai botnet. As of this morning, we have over 1,533. That says a lot in terms of attacks. And you see, as we are accessing the cloud, you're definitely passing through a channel, so ZTNA comes into place. So you need threat detection within your workloads, your APIs, your WAFs, and ensure that your DevOps guys are adopting security before they release it to the cloud. The third thing is governance. Definitely you need governance in the cloud. You need to know who is accessing the cloud. You need to know your north-south traffic, your east-west traffic, what kind of data can leave your environment and what kind of data is in your environment. And lastly, automation, right? As I said earlier, the traditional security is not agile, right? Honestly, the current teams right now are burnt out from a lot of security alerts, So how do you ensure security is agile? And this is where you now bring automation, to ensure that there are playbooks to flag down security violations automatically in less than a minute in your environment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm sure there's a lot more that we can consume when you're talking about security, right?
Yes.
So as you know, security is not technology, it's processes, it's people, it's the whole ecosystem when you're talking about it from that point of view, and specifically when it comes to cloud. And I think visibility is a big part of that. So I'll jump quickly because time is not really on our side. But I wanted to just take, and I'll start with you this time, Basha, right? So first of all, I'll ask a trick question. How many people here are familiar with the term shadow IT? Show of hands. Shadow IT. Mean anything to anybody here? Shadow IT. Shadow. Yeah? I know it has nothing to do with whether you're wearing black. It is it's a term very common with people who are moving to cloud. And I'd like to address that, the move to cloud, right? So a lot of people are taking different strategies in their cloud adoption journey, right? Depending on where you start, whether you are a traditional bank, a digital bank, you're a neo bank, or a pure FinServ, as they are called. Basha, I'd just like to start with you. Just very briefly, what are some of the adoption strategies that you're seeing in terms of cloud in terms of the journey to the cloud? What are you seeing people doing? Which different approaches are people taking?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think you mentioned a good point in terms of shadow IT and the need for internal IT within a lot of these organizations not being agile enough. And what emanates out of that is each of the various departments, whether it's your marketing, your dev, or any other department, starts leveraging their own way of going forward because they're just not being serviced well enough by IT. So we are seeing this, shift in terms of IT taking on the mantle of driving adoption in a bigger way. If you ask me what the biggest opportunity in that space is trying to take the complexity away. I mean, we've seen that in terms of the latest stats, 90% of organizations are consuming more than one cloud. Now, that could be across the hybrid work environment or from an infrastructure perspective. But what happens is you have this complexity of managing multiple service providers in separate teams. So the biggest trend and opportunity from an adoption perspective is creating the orchestration layer to bring all of these together and stitch all of the various investments that organizations have made with the various providers on their services. So there's two ways in which we've seen that driving adoption. One is, organizations are building that capability and capacity internally, and investment is happening from that perspective. Or they're partnering with a number of organizations who specialize in building out that managed services layer. And what that essentially creates is it creates the guardrails and best practice approaches, but within enough flexibility to innovate within those frameworks still. And that in itself is driving a lot of internal innovation around how organizations should build out their products, their services, how they need to change the way that they service their end customer.
All right, fantastic. So you've mentioned a couple of very interesting things in terms of people taking maybe a lift and shift approach in terms of the adoption of cloud services. Becky, so you work in a bank, right? So for those of you who don't know, shadow IT basically means people within the organization who are consuming IT services without necessarily going through IT, right? And without pointing at anybody in the organization. Is that something that you see in the real world? What is the adoption journey like? What kind of approaches have you taken and how are you seeing in the industry in terms of that journey?
Right. Well, at DTB, definitely we are slowly moving some of our services to the cloud, and there is a strategy that's in place in line with the services and offerings that we want to give to our clients as well as our partners. And it's just in line with what is happening in the world and in the industry generally, that we are not just looking at revenue streams from the traditional client who is an account holder, but also the partnerships and different people that are involved in the whole ecosystem. And some are giving us services, others are, we are giving services too. So you find one of the things that from a technical point, it doesn't make sense for us to consume, for example, Safaricom endpoints, APIs from Safaricom that are available on the cloud, and have them talk to on-prem and then avail the service to a third party on the cloud. It's just so many hops. It just makes so much more sense to consume them on the cloud and expose them on the cloud. And it just removes the hops and additional inefficiencies or points of failure that would exist with the leg that goes through on-prem. So just thinking through that, you'll find that they are somewhat like parallel environments. So similar services are available on the cloud as well as on-prem. So internally, they are being consumed by our internal applications, and then externally, they are being consumed by partners. So in a way, we're just trying to leverage both the capabilities of on-prem and cloud.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I can see time is not on our side, so I'd like to stop it there. I know it's an interesting topic. We can talk about it ad infinitum, but I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank the panelists so that we can go into the Q&A session. So MC, whoever is in the back, we can maybe take a couple of minutes for some questions. The question right here.
Hi, my name is Liz. I don't know whether I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I work for a company called InCentral. We are a Google Premier partner, so cloud is definitely at the core of what we do. One of the challenges we've seen in the market is there is no clear buying process for cloud, especially in the enterprise environment. So most of the RFPs or RFQs we've seen out are more of RFIs. So by the time we get to the end of the process, it's more of now them understanding what they needed in the first place. So how is that being solved, and how can partners like us support you in your cloud adoption journey? What are some of the priorities that you look for also in choosing the cloud public provider to work with? I hope that's clear.
Yeah, excellent question. I believe, Becky, that's to you. You take too long and you don't know what you want in English.
I think we're in Africa, so we prefer to go the Me Too way. Safaricom is doing it, so we'll do it as well. So I think mostly it's reliability and credibility. So the expectation is obviously that there's some of those industry-specific needs around security and reliability and the like. Because obviously we don't want any breaches, or you wouldn't want any downtime. So if that can be clearly articulated, that would go a long way in ensuring that you get the comfort over and above any other specific needs that are being sought by the client. So for financial industry, I think that would be critical, the ability to be reliable and the ability to secure. Another item would be the on-soil requirement, because obviously the regulations in some countries would expect that the data resides in the specific country. So that capability should also be considered so that they address any legal requirements or regulatory requirements. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I could add to that. So I believe the driver is digital transformation. A lot of organizations want to digitally transform, but not know exactly how. One thing that has worked in my conversations is have a closed room door. When you see the RFI, have a closed room conversation with the heads, and let there be architects in the room, because traditional networks and cloud networks are totally different. And in those RFIs, sometimes they can be waste of time. But when you have that meeting with them, they would actually see that they probably did not understand the cloud journey, and they will actually bring down that RFI and refine it. So I've seen closed room sessions with architects successful in those conversations.
Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. I think we may have time for one more question. Anybody from the floor?
I think also I can just add to that and say that the cloud approach should not be waterfall. So if you can also consider like consultancy services, just as he's saying, where you're guiding the client, would go a long way to just add the comfort levels.
All right. Yeah. Fantastic.
Can I maybe just make a comment as well there, Andrew, while we're looking for the last question?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think one of the, and this is to all the organizations that are thinking about taking cloud as part of their strategy. Cloud is not an IT strategy anymore. If you don't have the buy-in from your CEO to your procurement, to your HR, to every single aspect of the organization needs to come along on that journey. It's not a journey that's led by IT anymore. I think that in itself will help in terms of how newer models can be derived for commercializing and consuming cloud, but also in terms of how adoption is driven across the organization and not necessarily an imperative for IT alone.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think time's up. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for giving us your attention. We appreciate it. I think it's a wonderful conversation to have. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you very much.